Hey there, everybody. We are getting close to the end of the course. Got kind of a more lighthearted film than we've watched the last couple modules. So hopefully everybody will like the change of pace when it comes to that. Just get ready as we are approaching week 16 or module 16, which is the final module, where the final will be. So remember, the exam will be a little bit bigger, and the instead of just a quiz, and the discussion board will be more of a little mini paper. So be ready for that. Here we are. This is our film, Monsoon Wedding. It's an Indian film, kind of a pseudo or pays homage to Bollywood style film. So we'll talk a little bit about that. This is a 2001 film set in New Delhi, India. I think part of it's in Old Delhi and some of it's in New Delhi, so it's in both areas. It's an international co-production, okay, by production companies out of India, the United States, Italy, France, and Germany. So it was a big collaboration. Had a budget of about 1.2 million, and its box office was about 30 million internationally, so it did pretty well. It's considered kind of a comedy drama, right? It's definitely got some dramatic aspects to the storyline, for sure, but there's definitely some moments of comedy involved as well. It premiered at the Marché du Film section of the Cannes Film Festival. I don't know if I said any of that right, but what the Marché du Film section of Cannes is, so Cannes is a film festival, which again would be traditionally just screening movies, right? And then there'd be awards associated with those screenings and things like that in different categories. But the Marché du Film section is the business section of that film festival. So basically it's a production market for people going to sell their movie, right, and trying to get it distributed. So it's really just a place to get in front of different production companies from all over the world and say, this is what I have. Would you like to distribute it, right? And so that's where this one premiered, Monsoon Wedding, and it found distribution and made its way out to a larger audience. It was, again, critically acclaimed and had pretty good box office success as well. So, again, it's a little bit more lighthearted, again, with the comedy and the drama. The director is Mira Nair. We'll see if I said that right. You can go check that out. She's an Indian-American filmmaker based in New York. Okay, so she grew up in India and then made her way to the States for education and became interested in film. She began her own production company, Mirabai Films. Her company has produced 21 feature films, or 21 films total. Some of them are documentary, some of them are narrative, which is what we're watching, a narrative film. The films are focused on an international audience, and they really try to highlight or show the Indian society and Indian culture, okay? Not all of them, but some of them. In fact, more recent works that she's done have looked at some African countries and some other places in the world, right? But she really looks to appeal to an international audience. She attended Harvard University, and she actually started as an actor and then kind of moved into filmmaking. And one of the reasons she said she moved into directing is because it was so collaborative, right? Directing, filmmaking, instead of being a photographer or a writer or something like that. She got into filmmaking because she liked the collaborative nature of the process. Again, she made documentaries. Some of her documentaries are definitely award-winning, and they throw some light onto some situations and conditions that are in India that she wanted to shed some light on. And then she got into narrative film. And so we're watching a production. This 2001 production is probably, I don't know, it's probably 2 films into her narrative, maybe 3 films into her narrative career. And then the other person I wanted to just quickly talk about is Sabrina Hawan. Again, don't know if I'm saying that right. She is the screenwriter of Monsoon Wedding. Mira Nair tends to work with female screenwriters, right? She's worked with and collaborated with a lot of female screenwriters. This is one of them. This woman is a screenwriter, producer at this point. She's actually the head of screenwriting at the Tisch School of the Arts, which is NYU's film school. and worked heavily with Bollywood cinema. So we'll talk a little bit about Bollywood in a second here. Monsoon Wedding was her big break. She got a break from Mira Nair, and it kind of jump-started her career. And she actually wrote this film in a week, right? I think I talk about that later in a different slide. But the script for Monsoon Wedding, she wrote it in about a week's time, 7 days, which is pretty impressive. So just wanted to highlight that. Again, this is a female screenwriter, female director. First time we're looking at a duo where they teamed up, and it's all female in that regard. And Nair's definitely known for working with female screenwriters to kind of get her work put out there. So Bollywood, I mentioned Bollywood a couple different times. This film we're watching, Monsoon Wedding, is kind of pays homage to Bollywood. Really wouldn't be considered a Bollywood film, so to speak, really. But definitely there are some influences there, and we'll talk about where that comes in. Bollywood is a Hindi cinema, like genre of cinema. It's formerly called Bombay cinema. Bollywood is kind of what the nickname for it. It's actually the largest producer of films in the world, right? So in 2017, Bollywood created 1,986 films. Like, that's how many films got produced in that year and were released. And if you compare that to 2017 in Hollywood, Hollywood produced 740 to those 1,986. So Bollywood produces a lot of work, okay? Masala films is the most popular genre in the Bollywood kind of world. So a masala film, what is that, right? So a masala film combines multiple genres in the same film. So you'll see things that have action, comedy, romance, drama, and then they always include usually several musical numbers. Okay, so we saw this back with Slumdog Millionaire, where they paid homage to kind of the Bollywood style, where they had that musical number at the end in the end credits. Okay, that film included some action with a romance story and some drama, so it had some of the, definitely had some of the Bollywood kind of elements. And in this one, it's a comedy drama, so we're looking at a film that's got multiple genres combined, and there's some musical numbers that are they're not really as elaborate as you would see in a typical Bollywood kind of masala film, but there are definitely some musical numbers in this film. Bollywood cinema has been around since the beginning of cinema, right? So the first Hollywood talkie, which is the first Hollywood film that had sync sound dialogue where people were talking and you could hear it, was the Jazz Singer 1927. The first Bollywood talkie was a film called Alam Ara. I have no idea if I'm saying that right, but that was in 1931. So there's only a few years apart from when Hollywood got into sync sound talking films, and India following suit. Okay, so again, this whole Bollywood thing has been around for a really long time, since the beginning of cinema, and again, they do a lot of work that it all kind of follows, again, the same kind of pattern if you look at the kind of masala style of film. And they're pretty fun films, right? They have a lot going for them. They're pretty high energy and very colorful, and these dance sequences kind of break up the story sometimes. So when you're looking for something a little bit different. So the narrative here with Monsoon Wedding, it depicts a romantic entanglement during a traditional Punjabi Hindu wedding. So that's kind of the gist of the storyline as it stands, right? So you have this family that's preparing for this traditional wedding, and it's an arranged marriage for the daughter. And there's just all these little kind of romantic entanglements that are going on, and just kind of how the family kind of handles each other. And we're looking at kind of old traditions, and then you have the younger generation that's really into kind of Western tradition, right? And so the mixing of those two, kind of classic versus contemporary and old versus new, you kind of get that sense when you're watching this film. Again, it says right there that Dwan wrote the script in a week, which is something I mentioned earlier. It's a very women-driven story. There are women that drive the storyline, right? You have the mother, and I forget all the character names, I apologize. You have the mother of the family that's marrying off their daughter. She's a strong character in the film. And then you have the woman who's being married. She's a strong character. She has a cousin who lives with them, I think her name is Rhea. She's a pretty strong character and has a very important storyline in the movie. And then you have another woman who's got the only American name in the film. Her name is Alice, and she lives in the home, or she doesn't live in the home. She's one of the servants in the home, one of like the caretaker, housekeeper kind of person. She has a strong role and an important role in the movie and driving of the story, right? So it's, again, another film very similar in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, where it was very women-centric when it comes to the storyline and who's driving the story, although this isn't kind of an action film, a warrior film or anything like that. This is a romantic comedy, right? Or kind of a comedic drama, I guess. So a little different storyline, but women-driven in that story. So the themes that they kind of look at, I just mentioned part of it. Tradition versus Western influence. So you have the one side that's really interested in the Indian tradition, the Hindi tradition, and wanting to kind of follow tradition, and then you have the younger generation who's really influenced by Western stuff, whether it's music or the girl reads like Cosmopolitan magazine all the time, and they smoke and they drink and they're interested in marrying for love and having a loving relationship as opposed to an arranged marriage. Not to say that there can't be love in an arranged marriage, but they just look at it different, and they kind of are more into their sexuality and just being their own person, right? The newer generation as opposed to the older generation, right? And then there's a moral conflict that we touch on. It's actually kind of it's kind of interesting how they do it. They do it in a very good way. It's done creatively, and also it's not too over the top, and they do finish the storyline. There's a little hint of kind of sexual assault in this movie, which is something that is very it's a topic that really isn't touched on when you're talking about Indian cinema, but she touched on it here and felt like it was important and it was something that needed to be put out there, and she does a very good job of following that storyline. So that's something that's very untraditional, that they have this kind of moral conflict. And in the conflict, one of the father of the bride, he has kind of, he has a very strong relationship with this other man that's really been helpful to his family over the years, and he has to kind of make a decision as to whether or not he's going to side with that man or whether he's going to side with the other person in the family that's been wronged by this guy. So take a peek for that. It's a pretty good storyline. It adds for a lot of drama. That's where a lot of the drama comes from. There's a couple other scenarios that bring in some drama, but that's the main one that kind of gets resolved by the end of the movie. So look for that. It's kind of an interesting aspect of it, I guess. Cinematography. So moving on to cinematography, a couple of things that are just kind of big. Number one, you'll look, as soon as you see the film, you're going to realize like color is another big aspect. And anytime we're looking at mostly the Indian films, so the Slumdog Millionaire, and then this one, and then you look at the Chinese films where we're looking at Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or we're looking at The Last Emperor, color plays a huge role, right? And we're going to find the same thing here. This film definitely captures kind of the feel of Delhi, right? Old and new, what it's like to be there. You kind of feel the atmosphere through the photography of the film. Again, the other thing is big is color. Marigolds are very popular in Hindu weddings because they represent the sun and they symbolize brightness and positive energy. So there's a lot of marigolds all throughout this film, which is this bright, orangey kind of burnt orange color, and then you obviously see the traditional kind of reds and some other yellows in the film, and that just keeps that whole theme of that color of the marigolds and just color in general keeps coming up. Right? Like one of the things that comes up is like there's the event planner of the wedding. He's putting up a tent for everybody to kind of hang out in, and it's a white tent that he's putting up, which is Western, right? In the United States, we have white weddings, right? White is the color for the bride, and a lot of stuff comes in white and all that good stuff. So he's putting up this white tent, and the father comes out and's like, "What are you doing? Like this, we're not doing a funeral here. This is a wedding. It's supposed to be bright colors." So that he has him change it to a bright colored tent, and you'll see things like that keep coming up. Again, traditional versus Western influence, and the color keep coming back, right? And marigolds will be all over the place. It's shot on 16 millimeter film, which is a smaller film format. We've talked a little bit about it before. Traditional film format is 35 millimeter, and then 16 millimeters half the size. So another film we watched that was 16 millimeter was El Mariachi. So that was done on 16 millimeter. This was shot on a better camera with better lenses, had way bigger budget, right? 1.2 million compared to like the 7200 that El Mariachi was shot on. But you're still going to get that same kind of feel where it just doesn't, it seems a little grainier, seems a little grittier, seems a little bit more indie in style because the film format's a little bit small, right? So that's kind of where it comes from. The reason why it looks like it looks is because it was shot on 16 millimeter as opposed to the big Hollywood standard of 35 millimeter. Now today, it's all digital, right? Film, we don't shoot on film very often anymore. There are still some films that get shot on it, but not very many, okay? So that's one of the reasons why it kind of has the look that it has. They had a very tight shooting schedule. They hit 40 different locations in 30 days to shoot this film. So that's a lot of locations, a lot of moving around every single day to get stuff shot. So just kind of understand when you're watching it, the speed at which they had to go make this film was pretty high paced compared to, we talked about Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon had an 8-month shooting schedule, right? This was shot in 30 days. So you'll see the difference in kind of the scale and the scope and what you're able to do with a film compared to when you have to kind of rush through it and go as fast as you can. One of the things too, real quick, in the cinematography before we move on to acting performance, a lot of handheld camera. So in order to kind of meet the speed and demand that they needed to shoot at, they opted to go with a handheld camera, which you've seen before, but they shot a lot of handheld, which means there's the camera operators just kind of following the action and kind of panning around. So when you're watching it, it's going to have this kind of documentary-ish kind of feel that we're just kind of observing things that are going on, which again we've seen in a couple of our films, City of God, Breathless, maybe a couple other, El Mariachi even did it a little bit. You're gonna see that handheld feel, and that was kind of important to kind of the approach when they did the cinematography. Speaking about acting performance, okay. So it's a very strong female cast. We talked about it. We talked about there's 4 major roles that we kind of follow their storylines in the film, and it's all women driven, right? Had a very large cast in this film. There's something like 80 or 90 some cast members total with all the people who were at the wedding and in the families and all the stuff. So that's a large cast. It got to the point where the director was using family members to be certain roles in the movie because they just didn't have they couldn't find anybody else to cast, and they needed to count on somebody, so she used cast members. I believe they actually used one of the locations in the film is like her home in Delhi. So very small budget film. Those are the kinds of things that happen on small films. And then the other thing I wanted to just talk about, these artists are actually pretty big artists in Indian cinema, all the actors in the movie, except for like one of them that's a pretty big role. She went on to do something else and didn't really do much acting. It's actually the real life daughter to the woman who plays the mom in the film. And again, I forget all their names, but she's actually a psychotherapist now, not an actor. But one of the things that's also big in Indian cinema is these actors also oftentimes move into being dubbing artists. So what's dubbing? We've talked about dubbing before, and dubbing is when they don't have good sound on the set, so they go back later and they dub in the voices and the dialogue and all the stuff after the fact, right? Fistful of Dollars, the spaghetti western, we saw that. Probably did a little bit of that in Breathless, things like that. But one of the things that's kind of interesting is it's a pretty popular, widely used thing in Bollywood cinema where they'll shoot a movie and then they get a famous dubbing artist, actor, or actress to do the voice, because maybe the actor who's playing the role has the look that they want but don't sound like they want. They want a better voice. So they often are dubbing in someone's voice. So you're not even actually hearing the real actor's voice. Maybe every film you ever watch with them, you never know what their real voice sounds like because they have these dubbing artists. So many of the actors in this film, although there's no dubbing in this film, Just want to make that clear. It's all their own voices. But some of the actors in this film, like the girl who plays Rhea, she's a famous dubbing artist as well. So she goes and does other people's voices and sings, does everything. The whole acting performance, crying, being sad, being mad, being happy, being whatever is going on. And they actually have a little scene for some reason. It just kind of introduces a character. They have a talk show going on, which is to introduce this one character. And they have somebody come in and dub a scene, a very uncomfortable kind of scene, but that kind of shows you what these dubbing artists do. And they're talking about the whole, again, the idea of tradition and Western influence and how cinema should be changed and things like that. So go look for that. But I just wanted to bring up what a dubbing artist is because it's important to Bollywood and that style of filmmaking. And then we have editing, so we're getting close to the end. Editing, pretty straightforward, okay? The editing enhanced the handheld camera work in the movie, right? So there's a lot, again, moving around. And the editor was in there trying to pick the right moments to make cuts because this camera was like flowing around and just trying to catch what was going on. So being the editor on this job would have been a little bit tricky because just trying to catch what's going on. So Nair works closely with the editor to help kind of find the moments she's looking for to create the scene the way she's trying to create the scene, because they're not always shot in a traditional way where the coverage is pretty standard. It's kind of, again, a handheld camera kind of following the action around, especially when they see all the women together and they're just kind of going through some of the ceremonies and doing some of the stuff they do. It's a lot of handheld, not traditional coverage. Sound design. So music is a major element in Bollywood cinema. And in this movie, they want to pay tribute or kind of use some of that style and technique. So there's a lot of different styles of music in this film, okay? I can't pronounce them all, right? So you have these three that are right up on top, and it's traditional love songs, Punjabi folk music, and this Islamic devotional singing. So those are three types of singing or songs that you hear in the movie. And then they also include contemporary like pop and rap music. Again, to put the traditional and the contemporary kind of up against each other and kind of always competing with each other. So there's a lot of different styles of music that are traditional to the culture, which makes it more of a I guess it makes it more entertaining, right? You get to see somebody else's culture and see what's important to that culture and what the traditions of that culture are. So that's one of the kind of cool things about the movie is watching this wedding, this traditional Punjabi wedding, Hindu wedding go on. We're watching tradition, we're watching their culture, get to kind of peek into it and see what it's all about. So that's very cool. And music plays a huge role in it. You'll hear it from the beginning, from the title sequence all the way through the whole movie. Cinematic terms. So Bollywood, understanding what Bollywood is, understanding what a masala film is and what that includes. 16 millimeter film, so looking at the idea that it's a smaller film format that we're using, not the bigger, larger one. So it's a little bit grainier, stuff will go out of focus a little bit easier in some situations, and it just looks a little bit different than the bigger Hollywood movies that you would see. Or like, again, just compare it to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, right? And then dubbing artists, what a dubbing artist does and what they do. Okay, so that's the PowerPoint for this week. Hopefully you've enjoyed all the films. This one's a little bit more lighthearted, so enjoy this one, and we'll talk soon.